In New Orleans' sticky courthouse, Tara and Nia Brooks, fierce black twin sisters, strutted in with law degrees and a tight fraud case, expecting their rookie prosecutor win against Paul Vinton. Judge Leonard Hayes, a white-haired relic, sneered, "You don't belong here," halting their opening, papers scattering as he mocked their every word. They flashed resume, top of Tulane, defiance blazing, and he froze, smugness cracking. A power shift sparked, but his venom flared. What cruel blow would he strike to crush these sisters, a move that'd scar them forever? Before we dive into this raw fight, tell us where you're watching from. If you're fired up for justice over prejudice, hit like, subscribe, and join us. Let's battle the bias together. The New Orleans courtroom thrummed with a sultry noon heat as Tara and Nia Brooks stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the high-ceiling's sluggish fans, their crisp navy suits clinging damply to their skin, the faint scent of starch and sweat. Rising from the fabric as they faced the bench, their polished heels rooted to the worn hardwood floor, papers neatly stacked in their hands, a fraud case against Paul Vinton so airtight they could feel the victory pulsing in their veins. And the gallery buzzed behind them, a restless sea of faces stretching wall to wall, lawyers in wilted ties whispering over coffee-stained briefs, clerks shuffling files with a rhythm like a heartbeat, and spectators craning necks. Their murmurs a low hum beneath the creak of old pews, the air thick with the musky tang of wood polish and anticipation, a stage set for their rookie prosecutor. Debut? A moment 24 years of grit had built them for. From New Orleans' roughest corners to Tulane's top honors. Judge Leonard Hayes loomed above them, a gaunt figure perched on his elevated throne, his white hair swept back in a brittle wave, his pale skin taut over sharp cheekbones, his black robe swallowing the light as his gavel rested heavy on its block, a silent threat gleaming under the flickering fluorescent tubes, and his watery blue eyes glinted with a cold disdain that prickled their necks, his presence a wall of icy contempt, a relic of a system that had thrived on shutting out faces like theirs. And Tara's pulse quickened, her jaw tightening, because this wasn't just a judge. This was a gatekeeper itching to slam the door on their every move, a man whose 68 years had hardened into a monument of prejudice. He leaned forward, bony fingers adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "State your qualifications," his voice barking out, sharp and dripping with venom that cut through the courtroom's hum, and Tara stepped up, her spine rigid. "Tara Brooks, Tulane Law graduated top honors, Your Honor." Her words crisp, polished, a shield forged from late nights and relentless study. But Hayes cut her off, his lips curling into a sneer. "Irrelevant. You're unprepared." His dismissal a thunderclap, tossing her credentials aside like trash, and Nia's eyes narrowed, stepping beside her twin. "Nia Brooks, same credentials. We've prepared a fraud case against Paul Vinton." Her tone steady, unwavering, slapping their folder onto the prosecution table with a thud that echoed off the oak walls. A stack of bank records, emails, and witness statements so tight it could choke Vinton's smug grin. And she added, "We've got evidence airtight," her defiance a blade slicing through his scorn, because 24 years of battling bias had taught them to stand tall when men like him tried to shrink them, and they wouldn't flinch. Not here, not now. Hayes' sneer deepened, his pale hands folding over the bench. Inadmissible, his ruling booming, a gavel's echo without the strike, his voice thick with a condescension that made Tara's stomach twist, and he waved a dismissive hand. "You're wasting my time with this mess," smirking as a ripple of chuckles rolled from the back, where cops in starched blues lounged against the wall, their faces split with grins. "Back to school, girls," one muttered, his partner, snorting. "They don't get it." Their bias a wall of sound crashing over the twins, and Tara's fingers clenched around her pen, the plastic creaking under her grip, because this wasn't about evidence. It was about the deep brown of their skin, the tight coils framing their faces, the audacity of daring to prosecute in a room that wasn't built for them. And Hayes leaned back. "I've seen better from first years," his taunter jab, because their case, their proof meant nothing against his hate. A first humiliation landing like a fist to the gut, stripping their debut bare. Nia's jaw ticked, her voice rising. "Your Honor, we've got bank trails. Vinton stole millions." her words a lifeline hurled into the storm, pointing to the folder, its edges curling slightly from the humidity, each page a nail in Vinton's coffin, and Tara nodded. Witnesses. 2 ready to testify. Her tone sharp, a plea for reason in a tide of scorn. Because they'd spent months building this, nights poring over records, days chasing leads, a case that could have been their launch, their proof they belonged. And Hayes's lips pursed. I don't see the relevance. His lie slick, unwavering, his gavel hovering as if tasting their defeat. And the gallery's murmurs swelled, lawyers glancing at each other, clerks pausing mid-shuffle. A young black clerk, Miss Eva, her braids tucked under a cap, muttering, "They're good." Her voice a lifeline smothered by the cop's jeers. Let 'em flop, their laughter a wave drowning her whisper, because Hayes's power, his whiteness, trumped their truth, and Tara's breath hitched, her chest burning, because their stand, their fight was faltering under his glare, a win they'd tasted slipping through their fingers. Hayes banged the gavel once, the crack slicing the buzz. "Move along, I've heard enough." His order final, tossing their opening like scraps, and Vinton's defense attorney, a wiry white man named Greg Nash with a slick comb-over and a smug grin, leaned back, arms crossed. No case here, his drawl lazy, unchallenged because Hayes's bench was his playground, and Tara shouted, "This is bias," her voice cracking the room's haze, but Hayes's gavel crashed again. "Order, or you're out." His snarl a blade, and Nia gripped her arm. "We'll regroup," her whisper fierce, because this wasn't just a loss, it was a public stripping, their resumes mocked, their evidence dismissed, and cops grinned. Know your place, and their taunt a gut punch because 24 years of clawing up had taught them to rise. But this blow landed hard, a war igniting against a judge who'd never let them breathe. A first humiliation chaining them to a fight they'd wage with every ounce of grit, because Hayes's smirk, the gallery's jeers, hadn't killed their spark. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The New Orleans courthouse hallway buzzed with a sticky afternoon heat as Tara and Nia Brooks huddled near a chipped water fountain, their crisp navy suits now creased and damp with sweat. The faint aroma of ink and perspiration rising from the fabric as they gripped their fraud case files. The pages still crisp despite Judge Leonard Hayes's venomous dismissal in the courtroom moments ago, and Tara's jaw clenched, her deep brown eyes glinting with a fire that hadn't dimmed. "We'll retry. He can't bury us yet." Her voice a low growl, cutting through the hum of footsteps and muffled voices echoing off the scuffed marble walls, because 24 years of clawing through New Orleans' roughest streets had taught her to rise when men like Hayes tried to crush her. And Nia nodded, her twin's resolve mirrored in her own steady gaze. "We've got Vinton cold, he's going down." Her tone sharp, unwavering, flipping open their folder, bank trails and emails, a steel trap around Paul Vinton's slimy neck. A win they could taste despite the judge's racist slap. And they turned, striding back toward the courtroom, their heels clicking in unison, a rhythm of defiance against the system's heavy hand. Papers clutched like weapons in a war they'd just begun. The hallway swirled with life, clerks weaving through with carts groaning under file stacks, lawyers in wilted collars arguing in hushed tones, their briefcases swinging, and a young black clerk, Miss June, slipped from a side office, her grey blouse crisp, her braids tucked neatly under a cap, her eyes darting as she approached. "He's dirty, Hayes." Her whisper urgent, pressing a folded bribe log into Tara's palm, its edges yellowed, ink smudged but legible, listing payouts. From Vinton to Hayes, dates and dollar signs a smoking gun, and Nia's breath hitched. "This changes everything." Her fingers brushing the paper, a lifeline plucked from the courthouse's shadows, because June's risk, her truth, was a crack in Hayes's wall, a spark they'd fan into flame. And, Tara grinned, "We're back in," her hope surging, because this log, this proof could force a hearing, could shatter Hayes's smug reign, a chance to reclaim their debut from his racist grip, to nail Vinton and prove they belonged. They marched back, the courtroom doors swinging open, the gallery's buzz swelling as they crossed the threshold, their suits a stark contrast to the sea of faded shirts and tense faces stretching wall to wall, and Hayes loomed on his bench, his white hair a brittle crown, his pale skin taut over sharp cheekbones, his watery blue eyes narrowing as Tara stepped up. "Your Honor, new evidence," her voice booming, slapping the bribe log onto the prosecution table with a thud that rippled through the oak-paneled room, and Nia flanked her. "It ties Vinton to you." Her accusation sharp, a blade aimed at his heart, because 24 years of battling bias had taught them to strike when the iron glowed hot, and the gallery hushed. Reporters pausing mid-scribble, pens hovering, clerks leaning forward, a flicker of victory shimmering as Hayes's gavel wavered, his lips pursing, a crack in his icy facade, a win they could almost grasp, freedom from his scorn pulsing within reach. But Hayes smirked, a predator's gleam flashing across his thin lips, signaling Officer Tate, a wiry cop with a buzz cut and a sneer etched deep, lounging by the witness stand. "Check those," his order clipped, casual, and Tate sauntered over, his boots scuffing the hardwood, clutching a styrofoam cup of coffee, its steam curling in the humid air. And he tripped, his elbow jerking, the dark liquid splashing across the bribe log, soaking the pages, ink bleeding into a soggy mess. "Oops!" His grin a jagged blade, his pale eyes glinting with mock surprise, and Tara lunged. "You bastard!" Her shout raw, snatching at the papers, but Hayes's gavel crashed. Ruined, dismissed, his ruling a thunderclap, his voice slick with triumph. Tossing their proof aside like garbage, Nia's fists clenched. That was deliberate, her cry fierce, cracking the room's stillness, because their spark, their lifeline, drowned in coffee and scorn, a sabotage so blatant it burned. And Hayes leaned back. No evidence, no case, his smirk widening, a brutal lesson in how racism's hand could erase truth with a flick of a wrist. The gallery erupted, white-suited lawyers chuckling. Waste of time, their jeers a wave crashing over the twins, cops at the back grinning. Told you they'd flop. Their bias a wall of sound, and outside, protesters' chants swelled. Through the tall windows, justice for the Brooks, a chorus of hope ringing clear. But inside it faded, drowned by Hayes's gavel. Next case, his order final, slamming the door on their fight, and Tara's knees shook. "We had him," her whisper breaking, papers slipping from her grip, sodden and useless, a win they'd tasted dissolving in an instant, and Nia gripped her shoulder. "We'll find more," her defiance a thread, because 24 years of grit had taught them to regroup. But this blow landed harder, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let them breathe, and the courtroom settled. Hayes's pale eyes glinting, cops sneering, "Back to the books," their taunt a gut punch because their proof, their stand had faltered, evidence drowned, racism's sabotage chaining them to defeat, a spark snuffed in a heartbeat, yet not dead, because Hayes's smirk, Tate's grin hadn't killed their fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. When truth drowns in a racist flood, where does justice stand? Comment number 1 if you're stunned. Hayes sank Tara and Nia's proof with a smirk. Hit that like button and subscribe for more raw battles against bias. We're in this together. Now picture the twins locked out of court, voices rising. Will defiance crack the wall? Or will Hayes's next trap bury them deeper? Keep watching, the stakes are about to skyrocket. The New Orleans courthouse thrummed with a late afternoon heat as Tara and Nia Brooks strode through its marble halls, their crisp navy suits now creased with the weight of defeat, the faint scent of ink and perspiration lingering on the fabric. As they clutched freshly filed appeal papers, their fraud case against Paul Vinton revived, after Hayes's sabotage drowned their bribe log in coffee, and Tara's jaw clenched, her deep brown eyes glinting with a fire that refused to dim. "We've got this," her voice a low growl, cutting through the hum of footsteps and muffled voices bouncing off the scuffed walls, because 24 years of clawing through New Orleans' roughest corners had taught her to rise when the system tried to bury her, and Nia nodded, her twin's resolve mirrored in her own steady gaze. "Vinton's done. We've got Jake," her tone sharp, unwavering, adjusting the strap of her satchel where their star witness's affidavit rested. Jake Miller, a whistleblower ready to spill Vinton's guts. He's guilty, a testimony that could shatter Hayes's wall, and they turned a corner, heels clicking in unison, a rhythm of defiance against the judge's racist grip, their appeal a lifeline to reclaim their debut. Papers crisp with hope, despite the sting of their last loss. The hallway pulsed with life, clerks weaving through with carts creaking under file stacks, lawyers in wilted collars debating in hushed tones, their briefcases thudding against thighs, and sunlight slanted through tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. A golden glow that mocked the darkness they'd faced, and they reached the courtroom doors, Tara pushing them open, the gallery's buzz swelling as they crossed the threshold, a sea of faces stretching to the walls, reporters scribbling on pads, their pens scratching like restless insects, spectators shifting on pews, their murmurs a low tide beneath the creak of old wood. And Jake trailed behind, a wiry man with a salt and pepper beard and nervous hands clutching his coat. "I've got the truth." His whisper a spark, because he'd seen Vinton's fraud. Firsthand, risked everything to speak. A chance to nail the crook and prove they belonged. Judge Leonard Hayes loomed on his bench, a gaunt figure with white hair swept back in a brittle wave, his pale skin taut over sharp cheekbones, his black robe swallowing the light, his watery blue eyes narrowing as Tara and Nia stepped up, and his gavel rested heavy on its block, a silent threat gleaming under the flickering fluorescent tubes. "No entry," his voice barking out, sharp and dripping with venom that sliced through the courtroom's hum, and Tara froze. "What?" her shout raw, incredulous because they'd won the appeal. But Hayes smirked. "You're disruptive," his lie bold, unwavering, slamming the gavel with a crack that echoed off the oak walls. "This court's closed to you," his order a thunderclap. Locking the doors with a flick of his bony wrist, and Nia lunged. "We've got a right," her cry fierce, cracking the room's tension, because 24 years of battling bias had taught them to stand when doors slammed shut. But Hayes's lips curled. "Not here." His dismissal a blade, and he signaled Officer Tate, a wiry cop with a buzz cut and a sneer etched deep, lounging by the bench. "Remove them." His command clipped casual, and Tate sauntered forward, his boots scuffing the hardwood, grabbing Jake's arm. "Obstruction," his shout booming, cuffing the whistleblower with a snap of steel, framing him on the spot, and Tara's stomach dropped. "He's our witness." Her voice rising, desperate, because June's tip, their appeal, had sparked this chance, a win they'd tasted, only for Hayes to flip it with a cruel trap, racism's gate slamming shut, chaining them to defeat once more. Tate shoved Jake toward the exit, his cuffs rattling. "You're done," his grin a jagged edge, and cops swarmed from the back, their starched blues a wall of menace, hands clamping Tara's shoulders, Nia's wrists, dragging them out, their heels scraping as they thrashed. "This is illegal," Nia roared, her satchel slipping, papers fluttering like wounded birds, and Hayes leaned forward. "They're dangerous," his lie booming, staging a threat with a nod to Tate, who found a planted note. "Attack planned." His voice slick, theatrical, slamming it onto the evidence table with a thud, and the gavel crashed again. Case closed. Hayes's verdict final, tossing their appeal like ash, and cheers erupted from white-suited lawyers in the gallery. Good riddance knew they'd flop. Their jeers a wave crashing over the twins, drowning the protesters' chants outside. Justice for the Brooks, a lifeline fading beyond the locked doors. And Tara's knees buckled. "We had him," her whisper breaking, papers scattering on the marble. A win they'd grasped, dissolving in an instant, and Nia gripped her arm. "We'll fight," her defiance a thread, because 24 years of grit had taught them to regroup. But this blow landed deeper, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let them breathe, and the courtroom emptied. Hayes's pale eyes glinting, cops sneering. "Stay out!" Tate's taunt a gut punch, because their appeal, their witness, had faltered. Racism's lockout chaining them to a defeat they'd wage against with every ounce of fire. A spark buried in torment, yet not dead, because Hayes's gavel, Tate's cuffs, hadn't killed their fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The New Orleans streets pulsed with a humid dusk haze as Tara and Nia Brooks stood shoulder to shoulder outside the towering courthouse, their crisp navy suits now rumpled from the courtroom lockout, the faint scent of sweat and ink clinging to the fabric as they clutched handmade signs high above their heads. "Open the court," scrawled in bold red marker across weathered cardboard, their voices rising in unison. "Justice for Jake, justice for us." a chant cutting through the chatter of passers-by and the distant hum of traffic, because 24 years of clawing through the city's roughest corners had taught them to fight when doors slammed shut. And Tara's jaw clenched, her deep brown eyes blazing with a fire that refused to dim. "We're not done," her growl sharp, a vow echoing off the marble facade, because Hayes's racist gait couldn't silence them. "Not yet, not ever." And Nia nodded, her twin's resolve mirrored in her own steady gaze. "They'll hear us," her tone fierce, unwavering, adjusting her grip on the sign, its edges curling in the damp air, a lifeline they'd wield to crack. His wall. Their appeal crushed but their spirit unbowed, and the crowd swelled. Locals joining, fists raised. "Free the Brooks," a chorus swelling against the system's heavy hand, a spark they'd fan into flame despite the sting of their last defeat. The street buzzed with life, vendors hawking pralines from carts, their sweet aroma mingling with exhaust, office workers pausing mid-stride, phones out, snapping pics of the twins' stand, and a Fed in a navy jacket slipped through, his badge, glinting as he whispered to Nia, "Hayes is dirty, we're probing." His words a crack in the gloom, a lifeline plucked from the chaos, and Tara's chest tightened. It's working, her hope surging, because their protest, their chants had pulled eyes, Feds digging where Hayes's gavel had buried truth, a win shimmering beyond the courthouse's shadow, a chance to reclaim their case, their lives. From his racist clutches, and Nia grinned. "He's going down," her defiance ablaze, because 24 years of battling bias had taught them to seize sparks, to turn whispers into roars, and the crowd thickened. Hayes must go. Their voices are tied, a spark they thought might shatter his reign at last. But Officer Tate slunk through, a wiry figure in starched blue, his buzz cut gleaming under streetlights, his pale eyes glinting with a predator's calm, and he slipped a small baggie of white powder into Tara's satchel, its plastic rustling. As he stepped back, a dealer, his shout booming over the chance, cuffing her wrists with a snap of steel that bit deep, drawing a thin line of blood, and Tara froze. "What?" Her cry raw, incredulous, because their stand, their spark, had lit this fight, but Tate's lie flipped it, a noose snapping tight. And Nia lunged. "It's a setup." Her voice sharp, swinging a fist, landing a punch square on Tate's nose, cartilage crunching as blood sprayed, his yelp a jagged edge slicing the dusk, because 24 years of grit screamed to shield. Her twin, even here, even now. Tate staggered. "Assault!" His howl theatrical, clutching his face, and cops swarmed from the shadows, their boots pounding asphalt, hands clamping Nia's arms, yanking Tara's wrists tighter, chains clanking as they dragged them toward a van. "You're both under arrest," Tate barked, his grin returning, blood streaking his chin, and Hayes emerged from the courthouse steps, his white hair a brittle crown, his pale skin taut, his watery blue eyes glinting with triumph. Assault, both of them, his lie booming, doubling charges with a flick of his bony wrist. And the crowd faltered. "No," a protester shouted, phones dropping, fists unclenching as cops shoved Tara and Nia inside, the van's doors slamming shut, colder, darker, because their protest, their fight, had sparked Fed probes, a win they'd tasted. Only for Hayes's claws to strike fiercer, deadlier, piling crimes they didn't commit, chaining them to a jail cell with every fabricated sin, and Tara's knees shook. "We were close," her whisper breaking, blood trickling down her wrist, a brutal lesson in how racism's grip could twist defiance into despair, and Nia gripped her hand. "We'll get out." Her defiance a thread, because 24 years of grit had taught them to rise. But this blow landed deeper, a war deepening, against a judge who'd never let them breathe, a spark buried in chains yet not dead, because Tate's lie, Hayes's smirk, hadn't killed their fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. When defiance meets a racist ambush, how far can grit carry you? Comment number 1 if you're raging at Hayes turning Tara and Nia's stand into chains. Hit that like button. And subscribe for more tales of fighting the good fight. Let's keep the fire alive. Now picture the twins in a jail cell. Fists bruised but unbroken. Will their next move crack Hayes's cage, or will his wrath bury them deeper? Don't miss it, the storm's just brewing. The Orleans Parish Jail loomed under an oppressive dusk sky, as Tara and Nia Brooke stumbled from the police van, its rusted hull groaning shut behind them, the air thick with the acrid tang of diesel fumes and the stale musk of despair. Their orange jumpsuits chafing against wrists still raw from Tate's cuffs, the coarse fabric itching where sweat pooled beneath it, and Tara's legs trembled, bruised ribs pulsing with every jolting step across the cracked concrete yard, blood crusting her swollen lip from Nia's punch landing on Tate's nose. A memory of their street protest turned ambush, now chaining them to this hellhole. Hayes' racist lies piling assault and drug charges atop their fight, a brutal weight they'd never outrun. They shuffled through intake, a cavernous chamber with peeling grey walls and buzzing fluorescent strips casting a cold glare on grim-faced guards, their boots scuffing the linoleum as they barked orders, stripping them of their last scraps of dignity, tossing them threadbare blankets reeking of mildew and socks so thin they'd shred by dawn, and a hulking guard with a shaved head and a jagged scar snaking down his neck leaned close, his badge reading Pike, his breath sour with tobacco as he muttered, "Hayes' troublemakers, huh?" His words slithering into Tara's ears, chilling her despite the sweat trickling down her spine. Because Hayes' reach had followed them, a venomous whisper poisoning even this concrete pit, and Nia's jaw tightened. "We're innocent," her defiance sharp, but Pike smirked. "Not here," shoving them toward the yard, a sprawling dust bowl ringed by sagging chain link, crowned with coils of razor wire, where inmates milled, their eyes glinting with predatory hunger, sizing them up like prey caught in a trap. The gate clanged shut, locking them in, dust sticking to their damp skin as they scanned the expanse, the heat pressing down like a heavy fist, and inmates closed in, a trio stalking forward, their leader a squat woman with a shaved scalp and a scar slashing across her cheek, her fists clenched as she growled, "Heard your Hayes' pets," her voice a gravelly taunt, and Tara's stomach lurched because Pike had spread his poison, painting them as snitches or targets, and she squared her shoulders. "We don't want trouble." Her tone steady, but the scarred woman laughed, a harsh rasp. "Trouble's your twin now," and swung, her fist crashing into Tara's cheek, the crack splitting the yard's dull roar, sending her reeling, blood-welling hot in her mouth as pain flared across her face, and Nia lunged. "Get off her!" her shout roar, but the others pounced, one driving a thick boot into Nia's ribs, a sickening crunch ripping through the air. And 24 years of scrapping in New Orleans' toughest streets kicked in, Tara swinging back, slamming the scarred woman's nose, cartilage crumpling. With a wet snap, blood streaming down her chin as she howled, staggering back, shock flashing in her muddy eyes, and Nia twisted, ducking a wild punch from a wiry thug with a shaved head, driving her knee into the woman's gut, air whooshing out as she doubled over, and the third froze long enough for Tara to shove her hard, toppling her into the dust, kicking up a gritty cloud that stung their eyes, a fleeting stand carved, from grit and rage because they wouldn't break. Not here, not now. The yard hushed, inmates gaping, a grudging nod rippling through the crowd as the trio retreated, nursing their wounds, and Tara panted, wiping blood from her lip, thinking defiance might carve them a sliver of respect, a shield in this pit, until Pike strode over, his baton twirling, his smirk a slash of menace. "Told you they'd stir shit," his growl a whip, and he nodded to a wiry guard with a pinched face who slipped a small metal shank into Nia's bunk, its blade glinting. Under the harsh lights they attacked. Pike barked, his lie booming across the yard, and Nia's heart sank. "That's not ours." Her shout fierce, desperate, because jail was a weight, but this could chain them for years, and guards swarmed, pinning their arms. Cuffs snapping tight again, biting deeper into Tara's raw wrists, drawing a fresh trickle of blood, and Pike loomed, "Add assault, 5 more years." His verdict a noose, because Hayes' hate had stretched here, piling lies on lies, and the inmates' nods turned to sneers. Snitches bleed. Their whispers a tide burying their spark, a brutal lesson in how racism's claws sank deeper with every fight they waged. Then a shadow slipped through Ruby, a lean inmate with grey braids and tired eyes, her jumpsuit patched at the elbows, kneeling beside Nia's bunk. "You're not alone," her whisper soft, a lifeline in the storm, and she pressed a battered, Flip phone into Tara's palm. Call help quick. Her hands trembling as she darted back and Tara's chest swelled. Thank you. Her gratitude raw, dialing Clara, their mum's voice crackling through. Girls, oh Lord. Her sob, breaking the line. And Nia whispered, Hayes framed us, save us. Hope surging as Clara promised, I'll get someone. A thread to pull them from this abyss, but footsteps pounded, Pike charging back, his face twisted. What's that? Snatching the phone as Ruby spun. It's mine. Her lie bold, but Pike grabbed her, slamming her against the bunk, baton raining blows. Her cry sharp as blood bloomed on her cheek, and Tara lunged. Stop! Her shout useless, chains yanking her back, and Pike smashed the phone into shards, plastic crunching under his boot. No way out, bitches. His snarl a death knell, kicking Ruby's crumpled form, her whimpers fading as guards dragged her off, leaving Tara and Nia kneeling in the dust, cheek pulsing, ribs screaming. Because they'd fought, carved a stand, thought Ruby's gift might free them, but Hayes's shadow stretched crueler, deadlier, turning their spark into ash, and the yard's silence. Pressed down, inmates scattering, the air thick with blood and loss, because 24 years of grit had taught them to rise. But this blow landed deepest, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let them breathe, a spark buried in torment, yet not dead, because Pike's lie, Ruby's blood, hadn't killed. Their fight, they'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The Orleans Parish Jail solitary cell pressed against Tara Brooks like a damp shroud, its slick concrete walls glistening under a lone bulb's feeble flicker, the air thick with the musty tang of mold and the stale reek of despair. Her orange jumpsuit stiff with dried blood and sweat, clinging to the bruises mottling her cheek and the cracked ribs pulsing beneath her chest, and she slumped against the cold stone, her breath shallow, the ache a relentless drumbeat as she traced a jagged crack beside her with a trembling finger. The sting of Ruby's beating still raw in her ears, a brutal echo of Hayes's reach, locking her and Nia in this hellhole. Their sentences now stretched, by Pike's planted shank, chaining them to years they didn't deserve. Nia sat beside her, her own bruised frame hunched on the filthy floor, her deep brown eyes glinting with a fire that refused to die, her ribs a throbbing cage under the dim light, and Tara scraped at the crack, her nail chipping as she carved, a plea into the rough surface. Hayes framed us, each letter a jagged scar, her knuckles scraping bloody against the stone, a desperate flare etched in silence, because Ruby's shattered phone, her crumpled form, had lit a spark they wouldn't let fade, and Nia's voice rasped, "Keep going," her tone hoarse, but steady, her faith in Tara's grit a lifeline in this suffocating box, because 24 years of twinhood had taught them to lean on each other when the world turned its back, even here, even now. Hours bled into a suffocating stillness, the bulb buzzing overhead, its sickly glow warping their shadows across the cell, and Tara nursed her ribs, each breath a sharp stab, until soft footsteps shuffled outside, a shadow pausing at the slot. Miss Fay, a stooped inmate with grey curls spilling from a faded cap, her lined face peering in, her eyes widening as she squinted at the scrawl, and Nia surged forward. "Miss Fay, see the wall," her whisper urgent, slicing through the cell's gloom, and Fay froze, her gnarled hands clutching a mop, then leaned closer. "Lord, I know those girls," her voice trembling, because she'd scrubbed these halls long enough to catch whispers of Hayes's hate, and she nodded. "I'll tell," her promise fragile but real, slipping a rag over the words, memorizing them as she scrubbed, then shuffled off, her mop swishing to mask her haste, and Tara's chest swelled, a spark igniting, because Fay's courage, Ruby's echo, was a bridge, a crack in this jail's iron grip, a chance to claw their way out from Hayes's lies. Time dragged, the bulbs hum a relentless drone until the next dawn, when faint voices seeped beyond the cell, a TV blaring in the guards' lounge. Jamal, a gritty reporter with a voice like sandpaper, cutting through static. Twins, framed. By judge sources claim corruption, and Nia grinned, clutching her ribs. Faye did it, her whisper triumphant, because the story hit New Orleans airwaves, protests erupting outside the jail gates, megaphones blaring, "Free the Brooks!" their chants rattling the razor wire, and Tara pressed her ear to the wall. The buzz of outrage filtering through, a lifeline she could almost touch, because the city was waking, voices rising where theirs couldn't, and she thought freedom might claw its way in, years peeling back with every shout beyond the concrete. A wind shimmering in the chaos, their fight fanning a city's flame. Then a bombshell landed. Sam, Hayes' jittery clerk, a lanky kid with nervous hands and a mop of sandy hair, cracked on air, his voice shaking through the TV's crackle. "He paid me to bury files. Frame 'em." And Tara punched the air. "Yes." Her cry muffled but fierce. Because Sam's confession was gold, proof Hayes' empire was rotting. A spark swelling into a blaze, and Nia clung to the wall, ribs pulsing. "It's happening." Her hope surging, because protests thickened, signs bobbing in sweaty crowds. Their mom Clara on screen pleading, "My girls are innocent." Her voice a beacon piercing the dawn, and Tara whispered, "We're out." Her defiance a thread, because Faye's risk, Sam's break, had lit a firestorm. New Orleans roaring where their cell had silenced them, a chance to shatter Hayes' grip, to reclaim their lives from his racist cage. But the cell's hush deepened. The guards, lounge falling silent, and heavy boots stomped closer. A shadow filling the slot, Hayes himself, his gaunt frame wedged in a suit, his white hair stark under the hall's harsh lights, his watery blue eyes glinting with rage. "You think you're clever." His snarl low, venomous, and Tara's stomach plummeted, because he shouldn't be here, not in this pit, but he was. And Nia stood. "You're scared." Her defiance a blade, because his presence meant the story stung, and Hayes smirked. "Scared? No, I own this town." His voice ice, turning as swiftly as he'd come, vanishing into the hall's gloom, leaving a chill in his wake, and minutes later, the TV blared again. Jamal's boss cutting in. Story retracted, unverified claims. His tone flat, scripted, and Tara's fists clenched. He bought them. Her realization bitter, because Hayes had stormed the newsroom, cash or threats dousing Jamal's. Fire, and Nia sank. "No," her whisper breaking, because Sam's confession, the protests had roared loud, shaking New Orleans, a glimmer they'd tasted as victory. Only for Hayes to snuff it, his reach strangling truth, and he appeared again, peering through the slot. "You'll rot. No one cares." His grin a slash of yellowed teeth, and the door stayed shut, the bulb dimming as hope curdled, because Faye's courage, Sam's crack, had lit a flare, only for Hayes' hate to bury it, his power of vice tighter than ever. And Tara's fingers brushed the scrawl. Hayes framed us, still there, unseen now, useless, and Nia slumped beside her, ribs aching. "He's winning." Her voice, a thread, because 24 years of grit had taught them to rise, but this blow landed deeper. A war deepening against a judge who'd never let them breathe. A glimmer snuffed into ash, yet not dead, because Hayes' smirk, the retraction, hadn't killed their fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. When a spark of hope gets torched by racist hands, how do you keep the flame alive? Comment number 1 if you're gutted. Hayes snuffed Tara and Nia's fight with a smirk. Hit that like button and subscribe for more raw clashes against corruption. Let's stand strong together. Now, envision a jail riot erupting. Voices rising. Will their defiance shatter the bars, or will Hayes twist chaos into chains? Don't turn away, the next blow's about to land. The Orleans Parish jail yard simmered under a sweltering dusk sky as Tara and Nia Brooks shuffled back into general population, their orange jumpsuits stiff with crusted blood and sweat, clinging to the raw welts on Tara's wrists and the fresh bruises mottling Nia's jaw from their prison scuffle, and Tara's cracked ribs throbbed with every halting step across the cracked concrete, her busted elbow pulsing beneath a frayed sling, the air thick with the sour tang of unwashed bodies and the faint echo of despair, a brutal weight chaining. Them to years stretched by Pike's planted shank and Hayes' relentless grip, 16 now bloated by fabricated sins they'd never shed. The yard buzzed with a restless fury, inmates pacing like trapped wolves beneath the flickering floodlights, their eyes glinting with a raw anger sparked by Sam's leaked confession, his words a ghost haunting their whispers. "Hayes paid me." A crack in the jail's iron shell, and Tara's jaw tightened, her fingers brushing the welts, a stinging reminder of cuffs that had bitten deep. But she stood tall, 24 years of battling New Orleans shadows fueling her resolve. Even broken, because Sam's betrayal of Hayes had lit a fire, a fault line trembling through this concrete pit, ready to explode. Then it burst, a scream slicing the dusk. They framed the twins, an inmate's cry igniting the yard, and chaos erupted. Women surging, trays crashing against chain link, fists smashing guard posts, the roar swallowing the hum of cicadas beyond the razor wire, and Tara seized it, spotting a guard's radio dangling from Pike's belt as he wrestled an inmate, her hand darting out, snatching it, the plastic slick with sweat, and she bolted, "Cover me!" Her shout sharp, hoarse, weaving through the fray, ribs screaming. With every jolt, because 24 years of scrapping had taught them to grab chances. Even bleeding, even here, Ania guarded her, elbowing a lunging guard, pain searing her side as she held the line. And Tara pressed the button, voice crackling over static. "This is Tara Brooks, Hayes framed us." Her words a flare, broadcasting beyond the walls, a desperate plea piercing the night, and inmates rallied. "Keep her clear," their shouts. A chorus because Sam's leak had lit this blaze, and now their voice fanned it. Freedom shimmering on the horizon, a spark they could taste through the copper in their mouths. New Orleans erupted, protesters flooding the jail gates, horns blaring, "Free the Brooks," their chants shaking the chain link, news vans clogging the streets, Jamal's voice booming again. Jail riot escalates over judge corruption, and Nia's chest swelled. "They're listening," her hope surging, because Sam's words, their radio cry, had pulled feds crashing in, their vans screeching up, agents spilling out, hands off, their orders cutting through, hauling Pike back, his baton clattering, and Hayes's gaunt frame flickered on a TV screen. No comment, his white hair stark with panic, sweat trickling down his pale skin, and Tara thought, "We've got him," her breath ragged, because the city's roar, their stand, meant justice, years peeling back, a win carved from chaos, their fight breaking his grip at last. But Hayes struck, his voice snarling over a hacked jail PA, a doctored clip of Tara, "We're terrorists. We'll destroy this place." Her confession slick, fake, booming through the yard speakers, twisting their cry into guilt. And Tara's heart sank. He faked it, her whisper lost as inmates froze, their fury flipping. "They're liars," a stocky woman spat, fists turning on them, and the tide shifted, rioters storming their corner, a heavy fist slamming Tara's cheek, blood streaming fresh down her chin, and she swung back. "It's not us," her plea, drowned by shouts, a boot cracking Nia's ribs again, a sickening snap splitting the chaos, pain exploding white-hot, a gasp tearing from her throat as she hit the dust, and Hayes's squad swarmed, his gaunt frame looming on a grainy screen. "Finish him," his order a whip, guards piling on, fists pounding Tara's back, ribs shattering anew under their blows. "Stay down!" Pike's snarl a blade, because his lie, his bomb threat, had flipped rebellion into betrayal, his desperation turning allies into enemies, and the yard spun, smoke swirling from tear gas canisters, inmates scattering, their blood staining the concrete. A brutal hymn to a system he owned, and Nia curled tight, arms shielding her face, blows raining down, her elbow pulsing where it had bruised before, because they'd broadcast truth, sparked. A riot, thought feds might shatter Hayes's grip, but his wrath roared fiercer, deadlier, twisting their stand into agony, and guards laughed. "You're done!" Their boots kicking dust, and Tara's gasps rasped, blood pooling beneath her, because 24 years of grit had taught them to rise. But this blow landed deepest, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let them breathe, a spark buried in torment, yet not dead. Because Hayes's lie, the guards' fists hadn't killed their fight, they'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The Orleans Parish Jail infirmary thrummed with a sterile chill as Tara and Nia Brooks slumped on sagging cots, their orange jumpsuits soaked with sweat and patched with grime, clinging to the raw welts on Tara's wrists and the fresh bruises mottling Nia's jaw from the riot's brutal betrayal, and Tara's cracked ribs pulsed beneath her chest, her busted elbow throbbing under a frayed sling. blood crusting her swollen lip as the air hung heavy with the sharp tang of antiseptic and the faint rot of despair, their sentences now swollen by Hayes's forged terror charge, chaining them to 16 years stretched by lies they'd never outrun. A shadow slipped through the curtained doorway. Clara, their mum, her wiry frame clad in a navy coat, her hands trembling as she gripped the bars. "Your dad's alive!" Her voice a low thunderclap shattering the silence, and Tara's breath caught. "Dad," her whisper trembling, because 24 years ago she'd buried Victor Lang in her mind, a car crash stealing him when they were infants, a grief she'd carried like a stone, and Nia's eyes widened. "What?" Her tone sharp, wary, because 24 years of twinhood had taught them family was a fragile thread, and Clara nodded. "He's coming." Her revelation a spark flickering in this concrete tomb, a lifeline they'd never dared hope for amidst Hayes's racist grip. Across town, Victor Lang, a towering black ex-judge with graying temples and a jaw carved from steel, sat rigid in his dimly lit study, his broad hands clenched into fists on a polished oak desk, the glow of a TV screen flickering across his weathered face, casting jagged shadows over the tailored suit stretched tight across his shoulders, and the riot coverage blared, grainy footage of Tara and Nia bloodied in the yard, their radio plea crackling. "Hayes framed us," their voices, a knife twisting in his gut because those twins, battered and defiant, were his daughters, a secret buried 24 years deep, and his pulse hammered, guilt and fury boiling as he watched their pain, a father's failure etched in every blow they took, chaining him to a past he'd fled. He stormed out, his loafers pounding the hardwood, grabbing a DNA report from a locked drawer, its pages crisp with proof of his blood in those girls, and he barreled into his truck, tires screeching as he raced to Hayes's chambers, a sleek office atop the courthouse, its glass walls glinting under floodlights, and he slammed through the door, towering over Hayes, his white hair stark against the dark suit, his watery blue eyes narrowing. "They're my daughters!" Victor roared, slapping the DNA papers onto the desk with a thud that echoed off marble, and Hayes leaned back smirking. "Too late, Lang. They're buried." His tone ice because he'd crushed truth before, broken men like Victor with a flick of his gavel, and Tara's voice haunted Victor, her radio cry replaying, fueling his rage. "You'll pay!" His vow a thunderclap, because he'd walked away once, left them to Clara, but not now, not with their blood on Hayes's hands. Hayes chuckled. "Pay me, I own this city." His arrogance a blade, but Victor stormed out, leaking the DNA to the press, his voice booming on every channel. "Hayes framed my girls, here's proof." And New Orleans erupted, protests swelling, news vans choking downtown. "Judge's daughters framed," headlines screaming, and Tara grinned in their cell. "He's real," her whisper fierce, clutching Nia's hand, because their father's shadow had cracked Hayes's wall, allies toppling, Tate squirming. On air, no comment, his buzz cut gleaming with sweat, and Nia nodded. "We're getting out," her hope surging, because Victor's fight, his blood, was their key, years peeling back with every shout beyond the wire, a chance to break. Hayes's racist cage at last, but Hayes raged, his chambers a fortress of glass and spite. And he dialed a number, voice low. "Take him out," his order a hiss. And hours later, as Victor sped through New Orleans' outskirts, a black SUV roared up, crooked hitmen spilling. Out, guns drawn, badges forged, bullets shattering his windshield, glass raining as he swerved, crashing into a ditch, blood streaming from his scalp, and Nia's cell buzzed with a contraband radio. A guard whispering, "Your dad's hit." Her stomach dropping, "No." Her cry raw, because they'd tasted freedom, thought Victor's roar might shatter Hayes's grip, and Tara pounded the wall. "He's alive!" Her defiance a spark, because this wasn't just a crash, it was Hayes's claw, striking their father down, and the SUV peeled off, sirens wailing as hitmen vanished into the night, leaving Victor slumped, bleeding, his truck a crumpled wreck, and Tara sank. "He came for us," her voice breaking, because 24 years of absence had birthed this titan, only for Hayes to snap him back, his hate a storm drowning their spark, and the cell's silence pressed down, colder, darker, Victor's blood a mirror to theirs, because they'd fought, sparked a city, thought their father's shadow might free them, but his ambush roared fiercer, deadlier, leaving them gasping, their lifeline fraying. And Nia clutched Tara. He'll make it, her vow a thread, because 24 years of grit had taught them to rise. But this blow landed deepest, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let them breathe, a spark buried in anguish, yet not dead, because Hayes' hitmen, Victor's blood, hadn't killed their fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The New Orleans courthouse pulsed with a sweltering noon heat as Victor Lang staggered through its towering oak doors, his tailored suit torn at the shoulder, blood crusting his scalp from the hitmen's ambush, his graying temples slick with sweat, a limp dragging his left leg, but his jaw set hard, a titan unbowed, and he clutched a DNA report, pages crumpled but intact, his broad hands trembling as he shoved past bailiffs, their shouts echoing off the marble walls, because Tara and Nia Brooks, his daughters, sat chained in a reopened trial, their orange jumpsuits patched with grime. Tara's busted elbow throbbing under a frayed sling, Nia's cracked ribs pulsing beneath her chest, blood crusting her swollen lip from the jail riot's brutal turn, and the air hung thick with the stale tang of wood polish and tension, their 16-year sentence stretched by Hayes' lies, now teetering on the edge of justice or ruin. The courtroom swelled, reporters cramming benches, their pens scratching like restless flies, protesters' chants filtering through tall windows. Free Tara and Nia, a restless roar shaking the glass, and Victor crashed the trial, shoving past guards. I'm their father, his roar silencing the room, slamming the DNA proof onto the prosecution table with a thud that reverberated off oak paneling. And Judge Leonard Hayes froze on the bench, his white hair stark against his black robe, his watery blue eyes narrowing, caught mid-ruling as he'd sneered at their meager defense. And Judge Ellis, a stern black woman with gray-streaked hair, and a robe that hung heavy, peered down, her dark eyes sharp, testify, her order a hammer, because Victor's blood, his stand, was a shield they'd never dared hope for. And Tara's chest tightened, Dad, her whisper trembling, because 24 years of absence had birthed this giant, a lifeline piercing Hayes' racist grip, chaining them to a fight they'd wage with every breath. Victor faced Hayes. You framed my daughters, his voice a thunderclap thrusting the DNA report up, and Tara's lawyer, a rookie named Tate with a mop of brown curls and a rumpled grey suit, stood beside them, steadier now. Your Honor, new evidence, his plea firm, cutting through the gallery's murmurs, and feds flanked the aisle, their navy jackets crisp, presenting scorched bribe logs from Cole's torched files, edges blackened but legible. Bribes, forgery, here's proof, an agent's voice sharp, a lifeline salvaged from the ashes, and Nia's heart leapt. It's working, her hopes surging, because Victor's proof, the feds' logs, were cracking Hayes' wall, years, teetering with every word. A wind shimmering beyond the chaos, their fight piercing his racist cage at last. Ellis nodded. Judge Hayes, testify, her command iron, and Hayes swaggered to the witness box, his gaunt frame filling it, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with bony fingers. They're frauds, his voice tight, squirming under Ellis's gaze, and Victor roared, You paid Tate, burned evidence. His fists pounding the rail, blood trickling from his scalp, and Tate pressed, He rigged the case, his questions blades, slicing Hayes' calm, and Hayes faltered, sweat beading his brow. Lies, all of it, his denial thin because Victor's fury, the DNA, had jurors shifting, 12 tense faces in faded shirts and stiff collars wavering, doubt etching their brows, and the gallery buzzed, He's guilty. A tide turning because Cole's logs, Victor's blood, were peeling back years, their father's shadow shattering Hayes' throne, and Ellis leaned closer. Explain this, her tone steel, and Tara thought, We're free. Her pulse racing, because truth was clawing through, acquittal looming beyond this gavel, a chance to reclaim their lives from his hate. But Hayes grinned, a predator's gleam flashing across his yellowed teeth, slipping a note to a bailiff mid-trial, his whisper lost in the chaos, and minutes later, sirens wailed outside, a panicked voice booming over the PA. They confessed. Planned the riot, a fake video crackling through speakers. Tara's voice warped. We are guilty. Nia's layered beneath. We rioted, his forgery slick. A desperate claw flipping the courtroom and panic surged. Jurors scrambling, benches toppling, reporters shouting, "They're terrorists," their pens dropping as fear swallowed truth. And Nia's stomach plummeted. No! Her cry raw because Victor's proof, the Fed's logs were crumbling. And Hayes barked, "Double their sentence!" His order a gavel's echo, no vote, no pause, and Tate shouted, "It's fake." His voice wobbling, files slipping as he flailed, but Ellis's frown deepened. "Order!" Her gavel crashing, swayed by the lie, and Feds hesitated. "Verify." Till an agent muttered, radios buzzing, doubt creeping in because Hayes had bribed a juror, planted the video, turned justice into chaos, and bailiffs swarmed, yanking Tara and Nia up, chains clanking, Tara's sling snapping loose, elbow jolting, pain searing white hot, and Victor lunged. "You bastard!" his fists pounding the rail. But guards hold him back, his roar fading as they dragged the twins out, their jumpsuits tearing on splintered wood, and Hayes smirked. Life now! His verdict a noose, because his lie, his bribe, had flipped their win, his desperation, slamming them back into Max, and Tate slumped. "We'll appeal," his mutter feeble, papers scattering, but Ellis barked, "Remove them." Her order final, and Tara stumbled into the hall, chains rattling, the courtroom's oak doors slamming shut, a brutal hymn to a system he owned, and their father's fight, his blood, dissolved, life looming. Heavier than ever, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let them breathe, a spark buried in torment, yet not dead. Because Hayes's lie, the guard's grip, hadn't killed their fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The New Orleans dusk draped a heavy stillness over the city as Judge Leonard Hayes paced his glass-walled chambers, his gaunt frame taut beneath a wrinkled suit, sweat beading on his white hair, despite the hum of air conditioning, his watery, blue eyes glinting with a predator's desperation. His suspension looming after Victor's trial, bombshell cracked his empire, protesters still roaring beyond the courthouse. Justice for Tara and Nia. Their chants, a relentless drumbeat. He couldn't silence, and he gripped a burner phone, barking into it, "Finish Clara Brooks now." His voice a low hiss because Victor's DNA, Clara's courtroom fire, had lit this war, and he'd lost too much, his gavel slipping, his power fraying, so he hired a sniper, a lean shadow with a scarred eye to bury her in her modest New Orleans home, a bullet to her heart, because life in jail wasn't enough for the twins. He needed blood to end this fight. In the jail's max security wing, Tara slumped against a cold steel bunk, her cracked ribs a jagged ache beneath her orange jumpsuit, soaked with sweat and patched with grime, her busted elbow pulsing under a frayed sling, blood crusting her, swollen lip, and Nia sat beside her, her own bruised frame hunched, ribs throbbing from the riot's brutal turn, the air thick with the sour tang of rust and despair, their chains clanking as they shifted, 16 years now, a life sentence under. Hayes's forged confession, and a guard slipped a note through the slot. "Clara's targeted," scrawled in shaky ink, and Nia's breath caught. "Mom," her whisper trembling because Clara's stand, her voice, had fueled this fight, and now Hayes's claws reached her, a shadow they'd never outrun, and Tara stood. "We're breaking out." Her plan a desperate spark because 24 years of grit screamed to save their mom, even here, even broken. Tara scanned the cell, spotting a laundry cart rolling past, its wheels groaning, a chance in the gloom, and she pried at a loose vent grate, metal creaking as it gave, her ribs protesting with every twist, and Nia crawled beside her, dust choking. Their lungs elbow jolting, pain searing, but they pushed, Clara's blood calling them. Dropping into a service hall where a truck idled, and Tara hotwired it, her hands steady despite the ache, wires sparking as the engine sputtered alive. "Go!" Nia's shout urgent, because life meant nothing if Clara bled out. And Tara floored. Shared crashing a checkpoint gate, sirens blaring, bullets pinging off metal, ribs pulsing with every jolt, racing through New Orleans backroads, tires screeching on asphalt, sweat stinging their eyes. "Hold on, Mom." Tara's vow fierce, because they'd thought Clara's fight might free them, Now they'd save her, life sentence be damned. The truck screeched into Clara's quiet street, dusk fading to night. Abandoning it in an alley, Tara limping, her jumpsuit torn, blood seeping through the sling, and Nia hobbling beside her, ribs a throbbing cage, slipping past a neighbor's fence, the tang of damp grass sharp. Up Clara's porch steps, her door ajar, heart pounding as Tara peeked, "Mom!" Her whisper breaking, seeing Clara bound in her living room, a lean sniper with a scarred eye pressing a rifle to her arm, the barrel glinting under a flickering lamp, and Clara's navy coat was crumpled, her eyes wide. "Girls!" Her gasp a lifeline, and Tara tackled him, her grazed elbow slamming his wrist, the bullet grazing Clara's arm, blood blooming hot as Tara roared. Pain exploding, and Nia lunged, knocking the rifle free, its clatter loud on the hardwood. And they thought Clara was safe, her mum's pulse steady beneath their grip, a desperate stand carved from love and fury, because 24 years of surviving had taught them to fight, even bleeding, even here. The sniper thrashed, "Hayes owns you," his snarl a blade, swinging a fist, but Nia kicked his shin, bone crunching as he stumbled. "Not anymore." Her cry sharp, and they pinned him. Tara's arm pulsing as blood soaked the floor, thinking they'd won. Clara's ropes loosening, her mum's gasp free, until boots pounded outside, Hayes' squad bursting in, crooked cops in black vests, guns blazing, bullets tearing plaster, and Tara dove. "Down!" Her shout raw, shoving Clara behind a couch, her arm searing as a shot ripped Clara's chest, crimson pooling fast, her scream slicing the night. "No!" Nia's cry breaking because they'd escaped, reached her, thought their fight might shield her mom, only for Hayes' claws to strike fiercer, deadlier, turning rescue into carnage. Cops swarmed. "You're done!" one barked, guns leveling, and Nia lunged, fists bloodying a cop's jaw, blood spraying as he reeled, but they piled on, knees pinning her, cuffs snapping tight, biting deeper into Tara's raw wrists, drawing. A fresh trickle, and Hayes loomed on a hacked TV feed, his gaunt face smirking. Should have stayed locked. His taunt a slash of menace, his squad dragging Clara out, her chest bleeding, moaning, "Tara, Nia." Her voice fading, and Tara thrashed, "Let her go!" Her shout useless, ribs cracking anew under their blows, because Hayes' sniper, his cops, had flipped their stand into slaughter, and they hauled them off, chains clanking, Clara's blood staining their hands. "We'll get you," Nia's. Foul-ragged, because 24 years of grit had taught them to rise. But this blow landed deepest, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let them breathe, a spark buried in torment, yet not dead, because Hayes' guns, Clara's wound, hadn't killed their fight. They'd fueled it, sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The New Orleans night hung thick with a humid dread as Tara Brooks crouched behind Clara's tattered couch, her cracked ribs screaming beneath her blood-soaked orange jumpsuit, the fabric patched with grime and clinging to the raw welts on her wrists, her busted elbow throbbing under a shredded sling, blood dripping from a slashed arm onto the splintered hardwood, mixing with Clara's crimson pool, her mum's chest a wet mess from Hayes' squad's gunfire, her shallow breaths rattling as Tara shielded her, pressing a soaked towel to the wound. "Stay with me, Mom." Her voice a raw plea because Clara's life, her fire, was bleeding out, a mother she'd fought to save now fading in her arms, and Nia knelt beside her, ribs a throbbing cage, the stolen gun trembling in her hands, its grip slick with sweat and blood, a desperate shield against the cops closing in, their black vests glinting under the living room's flickering lamp, the air thick with the acrid tang of gunpowder and the copper stench of despair, bullets tearing plaster as Hayes' deadly. Retribution turned rescue into ruin, chaining them to a life sentence they'd never outrun. Tara fired, the gun bucking, rounds pinging off a stove, clipping a cop's arm, crimson spraying as he yelped. "She's armed," his shout sharp, and Nia's ribs flared with every shot. "Back off!" Her cry fierce, hoarse, because 24 years of grit screamed to protect Clara, even here, even bleeding, and cops ducked, returning fire, bullets shredding curtains, glass shattering as Tara yanked Clara lower, her mom's groan faint. "Girls." Her whisper, a thread, and Nia thought they'd hold their stand, their gun might save her yet, because they'd broken out, reached her, defied Hayes' sniper, a spark carved from love and fury in this hellish night. But chaos roared, cops pressing. A bullet grazing Nia's shoulder, blood blooming hot, and she gritted her teeth. Keep going. Her defiance iron firing again, the gun clicking empty, and Tara scrambled, snatching a fallen knife from the sniper's clutch, slashing a cop's thigh as he lunged. His howl sharp as he crumpled, blood pooling, and feds swarmed in, alerted by a neighbor's frantic call. Their navy jackets a blur. "Drop your weapons!" Their shouts slicing the din, hauling cops back, cuffs snapping. "You're done!" an agent barked, pinning the sniper, his scarred eye bruised from Tara's tackle, and Tara's chest heaved. "We made it," her whisper breaking. Because Clara's pulse faint but there, and the feds meant rescue. Hayes' empire cracking, a win she could taste through the copper in her mouth. 16 years life, peeling back with every shout. Beyond the living room's wreckage, their fight breaking his grip at last. But a crack split the air. A sniper's shot from a rooftop perch. The bullet ripping through Tara's spine, a white-hot explosion shattering bone, dropping her limp beside Clara, blood pooling fast, her legs numb, her scream swallowed by pain. As it engulfed her and Nia spun. "No!" Her cry raw, lunging to cradle her twin, the knife clattering useless, her hands pressing Tara's wound. "Stay with me!" Her plea ragged, because 24 years of twinhood, their unbreakable bond, teetered on this edge, and feds shouted, "Shooter, high ground," guns swinging, firing at shadows, bullets pinging off steel. But the sniper vanished, a ghost in Hayes' pay. His final card, and Tara's vision blurred. Nia. Her voice fading, eyes fluttering because they'd fought, saved Clara, thought feds would end it. And agents yelled, "Medic now!" their kits clanking, dragging the sniper's corpse out. Hayes' orders, his last breath a chilling taunt, because their stand, their fire had cracked Hayes' grip, only for his sniper to strike. Fiercer, deadlier, turning victory into torment, and cops loomed. She's still a threat. Pikes snarl a whip, stepping back as feds swarmed. Clear, their order hollow as medics rushed Tara, spinal, critical, their voices sharp, lifting her onto a stretcher, blood dripping, her eyes locked on Nia's, a silent vow, and Nia staggered up. "I'll kill him," her defiance a spark, because Hayes' sniper had flipped their win. Clara's chest wound, Tara's spine, a storm of pain, and the house hummed, agents shouting, "Hayes is behind this," radios buzzing, "Get him." But he laughed from a hacked feed, "Never win," his voice a ghost, because he'd lost his squad, his sniper, thought chaos would bury them. And Tara's stretcher rolled, her pulse weak. Clara's bed beside her, medics pressing her chest. She's fading, their urgency a blur, and Nia limped after, "We're not done." Her vow a thread, because 24 years of grit had taught them to rise. But this blow landed deepest. Hayes' hate a sniper's precision, burying their spark in agony. And the hall swallowed them, lights dimming, the air thick with blood and loss because they'd escaped. Fought, thought their mother's stand. Their fire might shatter Hayes' grip, but his gambit roared back, a storm of bullets turning their last stand into ash. And Tara's eyes closed, Clara's breath slowed, Nia's fists clenched, because 24 years of surviving had taught them to rise. But this blow landed deepest, a war deepening against a judge who'd never let them breathe. A spark buried in torment, yet not dead, because Hayes' sniper, Clara's blood, hadn't killed their fight. They'd fueled. It sharpened it for a battle he couldn't foresee. The New Orleans hospital's sterile hush enveloped Tara Brooks as she jolted awake in a stiff bed, her spine a numb void below a heavy cast, legs lifeless under a thin gown clinging to her sweat-damp skin, her cracked ribs a jagged ache beneath, fresh bandages, blood crusting her swollen lip, and the air pulsed with the sharp tang of antiseptic and the faint hum of monitors beeping, their green lines spiking erratically, casting a wan glow across her bruised face, while Nia sat beside her, her own orange jumpsuit swapped for a gown, ribs a throbbing cage, her deep brown eyes glinting with a fire unbroken, and Clara lay in the next bed, her chest swathed in gauze, breath shallow but steady, alive despite the bullet's tear, and feds swarmed the room, their navy jackets rustling, an agent muttering, "Hayes is jailed," his voice sharp, because the sniper, the hitmen, had cracked his empire, and Tara's chest tightened. "We survived," her whisper trembling, because 24 years of grit, their desperate stand, had pulled them through. 16 years stretched to life teetering, freedom shimmering in the chaos. The TV flared, Hayes on screen, cuffed in a precinct hall. His gaunt frame slumped, his white hair stark under harsh lights. "Corrupt judge down," an anchor's voice booming. And New Orleans erupted, protests morphing to cheers beyond the hospital's glass. Justice prevails, a tide washing away years. But a bombshell crashed. Clara stirred, her hands clutching a hidden photo, trembling as she locked eyes with Tara. "Your brother's alive." Her tone steady, a storm breaking, and Nia frowned. "Marcus," her voice soft, wary, because 24 years ago they'd mourned him. A cop killed in a raid, a loss they'd carried like a scar, and Clara nodded. "He's undercover." Her revelation a thunderclap, revealing Marcus Lang had faked his death to infiltrate Hayes' ring, a secret buried deep and now exposed. And Tara's breath hitched. He's out there. Her realization bitter, because 24 years of twinhood had forged this family, only to crack it open with this truth, a shadow deeper than Hayes' hate. Feds pounced. "We'll track him," an agent barked, radios buzzing, but the screen flared again. Prison riot at max, Hayes escaped. The anchor's voice sharp, cutting through their fragile win, and Nia's blood chilled. "No," her cry raw, because life had loomed, freedom had bloomed, only for Hayes to slip free. His last words on a hacked feed echoing, "Your brother's mine," a taunt aimed at Marcus, a cop unseen, alive, and Clara paled. "He knows Marcus betrayed him," her whisper haunted, eyes darting to Tara, because 16 years ago she'd sent Marcus underground, shielded him from Hayes' wrath after Victor's death. Never dreaming his reach could stretch this far, and now his escape turned it loose, a ghost unburied, and Tara's fists clenched. "What's he got?" Her demand a blade, because their fight, their blood, had freed them, only to birth this, a war reborn in a brother's shadow. And Feds scrambled. "He's armed, lethal." Their urgency a blur, but the hospital pulsed, colder, darker, because Tara's spine, Clara's chest, were prices paid, a win snatched, and Hayes' flight flipped it, his knowledge a noose tightening, and Nia sank. "I thought he was gone," her voice trembling, because she'd mourned Marcus, raised them with Clara, thought this was the end, but his life, Hayes' escape, turned victory to ash, and Tara wheeled closer. "We'll find him." Her vow fierce, her fight reborn, because Hayes' hate, his sniper, had crippled her, but not her spirit, and the room hummed, monitors, beeping, Feds shouting, "Lock it down." Their orders sharp, and Clara gripped her hand. "He's yours." Her eyes wet, because she'd hidden Marcus, shielded him, thought this war was won. But Hayes' shadow stretched cruelest, deadliest, and Nia stared. "He's not done," her voice hollow, because 24 years of grit had taught them to rise. But this twist landed heaviest. A brother lost, now found. A threat unburied in a judge's flight. A war deepening beyond these walls. A spark blazing anew against a foe who'd never let them rest. Tara and Nia Brooks's relentless battle through New Orleans' corrupt courts teaches us that justice is a brutal gauntlet, not a gift forged in blood and grit against a wall of racial hate. From Hayes' sneering courtroom lockout to a sniper's, bullet shattering Tara's spine, their story lays bare how prejudice twists power into a noose, with forged evidence, planted charges, and lethal ambushes burying their black voices despite their law degrees. Every stand, riots, escapes, a father's roar, shows resilience isn't just surviving. It's fighting when bones break, when family bleeds, when hope turns to ash. Victor's DNA, Clara's courage, reveal roots as both strength and targets, snuffed by Hayes' ruthless hand, a lesson in how racism escalates, striking deadlier with every crack it faces. His escape, Marcus's unburied life, prove evil doesn't bow. It bends, hitting harder when cornered, 16 years ballooning to life, a brother's safety now a blade. Their fight screams that justice demands a chorus, like New Orleans. Protests to shatter corruption's grip, because degrees mean nothing when hate owns the gavel. Tara's wheelchair vow, Naya's fire, show change starts with those who rise, even paralyzed, against a system thriving on silence, a war that never sleeps. When a brother's shadow flips victory to peril, what keeps you pushing forward? Comment number 1 if Tara and Naya's unbreakable grit inspires your stand against injustice. Like, subscribe and share to fuel this fight. Your voice can tip the scales. Thanks for riding this raw journey with us. Your support lights the path to truth. Here's wishing you the strength to face your own hazes. May you rise unbowed always.